Some of you may have noticed I didn't have any videos out yesterday. In fact, I didn't even have anything up on the Patreon yesterday. It's not because I didn't want to work or I took the day off. We had a freaking typhoon come through here. Or I guess it's technically was a tropical cyclone that kind of turned into a typhoon as it was going over the Philippines. And the storm was like so large, you actually couldn't see the Philippines underneath it when you're looking at the weather stuff. So we didn't have power, we didn't have internet, we didn't have water for like, I don't know, 18 hours, something like that. It was pretty wild. It's not the scariest typhoon I've ever been through. We actually went through one 5 years ago when my middle child was about 4 months old. That was far scarier than that one, but it was a big one. And obviously I wasn't able to do any work because there was no power and no internet. Unfortunately, I actually had a lot of stuff to talk about because we did have New York Comic-Con and there was a ton of major news coming out of there. You know, it seemed like Marvel and DC were just saving all their bullets for that one. It felt like there was more big news at a New York Comic-Con rather than even San Diego Comic-Con. And obviously the biggest news was a confirmation of something that we had already heard, or at least a rumor that was out there that I thought was probably pretty accurate, turned out to be true. Over 20 years after they shook up the comic book world with the iconic Hush storyline in Batman 608 through 619, Jim Lee, Jeph Loeb, Scott Williams, and Alex Sinclair are reuniting for Hush 2, which will run in the pages of DC's main Batman series starting in March 2025's Batman 158. DC was silent as to what will happen to the current creative team on the series, Chip Zdarsky and Jorge Jimenez. There was actually word out there from Chip Zdarsky of what will happen with him, but I'll get to that later because that's not the big news. The big news is that, yes, Jim Lee, Jeph Loeb are returning to the ongoing Batman series, and it's not just for a throwaway story or something new. It's for Hush 2, and this is not an enormous surprise. You know, it sounds like they've been working on this for quite some time. The rumor was that Jim Lee had actually started illustrating the book around springtime, so he's been doing this for quite some time, and Hush 2 makes a whole lot of sense, obviously. When you look at the pantheon and annals of Batman, there are a ton of comic book stories that still sell. Batman Year One, Dark Knight Returns, The Killing Joke, Court of Owls, and Hush is definitely amongst those. That will be a perennial seller, probably for a very, very long time. So it does make a whole lot of sense they would go back to Hush 2. As far as, Hush, for me, I think it's one of the most wonderfully illustrated Batman stories of all time. Is it one of the most wonderful Batman stories of all time? I think it's pretty good. I don't think it's great. I think there's much better stuff out there, but it is good. And it's clear if you go read Hush that they changed their mind, or at least they decided once people figured out that Hush was going to be Jason Todd, they were like, wait, we can't do it because they figured out what it is, because that makes sense. Let's make it Timothy Elliott or whatever. I don't know. What do you guys think? It's clear to me at least that they changed what the ultimate ending of the book was going to be once people were like, oh yeah, that's Jason Todd, that's who it's going to be. Or do you think they were just screwing with us, testing the waters for a Jason Todd return, which obviously we got in Under the Red Hood? I think they initially wanted to be Jason Todd, and then they threw in Timothy Elliott, but obviously they did build him up by the end of that thing. Kind of looks like a mummy, but a man that was playing Batman like a fiddle actually ended up breaking his skull, didn't he? Isn't that when he got back, he broke his skull and Alfred had to call in Timothy Elliott? I believe that's how it happens. I've read it twice, but I haven't read it in the last couple of years. So big news coming out of there. DC Comics needs something hot. Jim Lee, Jeph Loeb, Batman Hush 2 feels like something like molten hot, like very, very hot, that will have a lot of people in there. I also like that they're throwing out some chutzpah. We don't need a #1 issue on this sumbitch. I'm Jim Lee. That's Jeph Loeb. This is Hush 2. And we are not going to interrupt the series and change the numbering for a fucking Jim Lee comic book because we don't need to. Jim Lee coming in at issue 158 is enough to send that sumbitch through the stratosphere. The 6-issue storyline will reteam the entire creative team behind the fan favorite 2002 run, while the details of the storyline remain under wraps beyond the initial promises that not everyone will make it out alive, which, to be fair, is a Jeph Loeb storyline, and he does like killing characters, and that the story will impact current DCU continuity. Hush 2, or H2SH, as the t-shirts worn by the creative crew on the panel put it, begins in Batman 158, released in March 2025, but fans don't have to wait that long to find out more. A preview will appear in the first issue of Justice League Unlimited, released November 27th. That is very, very, very smart news to throw in there. A little preview of it in Justice League Unlimited. If you're wanting to jumpstart interest in Justice League Unlimited, if you want to see some preview of what's going to happen with Jim Lee and Jeph Loeb when it comes to Batman Hush, you got to buy this other comic book first. I think that's really, really smart marketing and utilizing Jim Lee returning to an ongoing series for the first time in a very, very long time. Obviously, Hush came out, I believe, 22 years ago. Sounds like it's going to be a 6-issue storyline. I never anticipated that Jim Lee would be on Batman for the long haul, but I think 6 issues is probably enough to give this thing the jolt that it needs, put it right back to the number one selling comic book in the entire industry. Will Jeph Loeb stay on? I don't anticipate that. I don't know that Jeph Loeb at his age really wants to be writing an ongoing, grinding, Batman series for a couple of 3 years. I imagine these guys are the hired guns, come in to save the title, regenerate interest in Batman, get it up to a certain place before whoever the new creative team is going to be. Do not know who that's going to be. I don't even have an idea. I haven't heard any rumors about it. But hopefully they go out there and they get somebody good. They don't need a big name because the interest generated by Jim Lee and Jeph Loeb should be enough that enough people will probably stick around for one extra issue and give the new creative team a chance. So they don't have to be a big name. They just have to be really, really good. And there are some really good writers out there. I was admittedly excited for Chip Zdarsky coming over to Batman. I was like, hey, this is guaranteed to be good. Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil run was really solid. He should fit right into Batman. And boy, was I ever wrong. Like, I couldn't have been more wrong. Of course, I was also excited for Ram V. I was like, hey, he's going to take a different approach on Batman and Detective Comics. I didn't realize he was just going to introduce a storyline and just sit there and squat for 3 fucking years straight. They need someone to bring something exciting to Batman. If Jim Lee and Marie Javins reach out to me personally, like, hey, we don't know who we're going to do yet. What do you think? Who would be a good idea? Well, Jeremy Adams, who they wouldn't put on the book, because he's going to have 2 with Green Lantern and Aquaman. Robert Venditti, I think, obviously would do a really good job. Some people outside of DC Comics that I think could do good. Tony Fleecs has been doing a lot of awesome stuff. Don't know that he's right for Batman, but he does a lot of dark storylines and the things that he does do, even though they kind of look like kids' properties. Ryan Parrott probably deserves a look-see on a major title at this point. So there are some very talented people out there. Could you get David Pepos, somebody that I don't personally like? I think he comes off as a kind of a douchebag, but my goodness, is he doing a really good job on Space Ghost? And there certainly are some similarities between Space Ghost and Batman. So I do think that the talent is out there. Hopefully they get the right person and they utilize the momentum created by Jim Lee and Jeph Loeb returning for Hush 2 to catapult the title and really make a new star at DC Comics. That's what they should be wanting to do with this opportunity for Jim Lee coming back for 6 issues on an ongoing series. The H2SH logo, I could take it or leave it. They like to do stuff like that with movie logos and stuff. Hush 2, H2SH. It's not such a cool idea that I want to get a t-shirt about it, but I understand if you are in that boat. Now, as far as Chip Zdarsky, I did mention I would bring this up. He actually went to a Substack to address this, stating, I love Batman. It's been a true joy working on the title, but sometime in the spring, I got the itch in the back of my brain to wrap things up, partly because Jorge and I were finishing up the giant failsafe Zur story, but also because my amazing Bat editor, Ben Abernathy, had left for Transformers G.I. Joes at Skybound. I also had a terrifying workload in front of me and had to make some hard decisions about what needed to be prioritized. So just before C2E2 in April, I let DC know that I was leaving. So there you go. According to Chip Zdarsky, he decided to vacate the Batman title. He didn't want to work on it anymore. He was upset that Ben Abernathy had left, and they didn't really name a new group editor for Batman for like 5 months. It was Katie Kubert, I think, in the interim. Now they finally do have a full-time Batman group editor that's been hired and all that kind of stuff, but apparently he'd already thrown in his notice to Marie Javins. Chip's got an amazing opportunity to really elevate himself. He got the best artist probably in the industry that does, ongoing series, Jorge Jimenez, on the biggest character at either Marvel or DC, Batman in a good state or even kind of average, kind of outsells everything. And I don't think he really utilized it to its best. I thought the opening salvo with Failsafe was interesting. It felt like he was a threat. Seeing Failsafe destroy the entire Justice League single-handedly, the entire Bat family single-handedly, and then Superman single-handedly did make him seem like he basically was unbeatable at that point. but then sending Batman to another multiverse only to return and not have any money, and his house is gone and all that kind of stuff, and then go into nightmares or whatever that thing was, and then Gotham War, and then you finally circle around after like 15 months back to fail safe, I think. And then that leads into tie-ins to Absolute Power, which weren't very good at all. And what a wasted opportunity. He did nothing big time. Like, there's no signature thing that people are going to be able to look at with Chip Zdarsky's run and say he did great. He wasted a lot of great art. That's mostly what I kind of come away with, and the whole like surfing a rocket body from the moon all the way to Earth and landing it at the Fortress of Solitude, I think felt like it probably should have been like the low moment. Then he kept making it lower and lower and lower with terrible creative, obviously culminating with his idea, I believe, to bring in Tini Howard to do a Batman Catwoman crossover with Gotham War, which is terrible. So you fucked up, Chip. You had one opportunity to make yourself a superstar, a fucking legend, and you could have done that on Batman, and you didn't. You just kind of fumbled the whole thing like a monkey fucking a football, and we got a very low stakes, boring, not very good Batman, regrowing hands and all kinds of weird shit going on throughout this thing that in the end will be remembered because de Jorge Jimenez art is spectacular, but will be utterly forgettable because the Chip Zdarsky writing was so average at best and absolutely atrocious in its worst times. So there you go. Jim Lee coming back to save not only DC Comics, he's coming back to save Batman. And Batman actually needs it this time. He needs the boost. And I believe if James Tynion can boost Batman from the Tom King, like 80,000 a month sales to like 150, I think Jim Lee can get it up to 180. You know what I'm saying? Because Jim Lee's an actual fucking superstar, and James Tynion just wasn't Tom King. And that was enough for that. And I think while people probably don't think of Chip Zdarsky quite like they do with Tom King, I don't think it's that far off because his run sucked. Really, really bad stuff there. And hopefully Chip Zdarsky does not end up on G.I. Joe's with Ben Abernathy, because we know that Ben Abernathy already went out there and hired Kelly Thompson, Dan Waters, people that he's comfortable working with. I do not want Chip Zdarsky's take on fucking G.I. Joe. Go put him on Archie books or something like that and let him rehabilitate his fucking reputation before you put him on anything important again. I do want to say thank you all very much for joining me today talking about this as we've weathered the storm. We're back in action. We will not have as much stuff up as I would like to in the next few days, but we will catch up and we will get ahead of schedule and have some fun here. If you would like to support what we're doing here on Think Critical YouTube, I do want to invite you to come visit me on Think Critical Patreon. There's a link in the video description. Depending on the tier that you support, you get awesome podcasts with all your favorite guests and lots of me. If you like me and you want more of me, there's no better place to be than Think Critical Patreon.